I hope Ms. Stetler will help me share my presentation. I'm speaking on generally on regulatory and policy concerns concerning the deployment of artificial intelligence in healthcare. Please, can Ms. Stetler, can you help me share my presentation?
Yes, absolutely. I'm just getting it ready right now.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay, thanks very much. Speaking on generally on regulatory and policy concerns, on some issues in the introduction, and then the deployment of AI in healthcare, then the specific regulatory and policy concerns, by which I'll be focusing on process concerns and then use concerns. And finally, we just talk briefly on towards balance in regulatory policy. The next slide. The rapid development of AI enabled systems have raised definite regulatory and policy concerns, and I think we are all agreed on that. Of course, there are many benefits of AI technologies, but then the other sides of AI technology also raise some concerns, especially in the area of this regulation. I put the next slide, please. The OECD policy response to the COVID-19 pandemic has noted quite a number of things that AI technologies and tools can help us achieve in combating the pandemic. AI definition, I'm going straight to AI definition now. There's no precise definition. Dr. Donnelly has tried to give us some definitions the other time, and I think those definitions are very, very accurate. So maybe we skip that and then move on to machine learning and deep learning. These are two forms of artificial intelligence presently now that has been used in various sectors of the society, including healthcare space. Machine learning is a technique which concerns algorithms, allowing computers to self-improve by receiving data to train itself and predict technical solutions. Deep learning is the other arm of AI, which is more ambitious. Okay. Then general distinctions of AI, we have the weak one, we have the general one, but I think basically we distinguish between the narrow or weak AI from the artificial general intelligence AI, or the strong AI, which is still being developed, because there's no AI system presently that can claim human intelligence. I think we move on to deployment of AI in the healthcare space. AI, the first thing to note here, which I'm noting, is that AI tools is not supposed to replace healthcare, to replace the work of physicians or other healthcare staff, but is to complement, to facilitate and enhance human work is to support. AI has applications across the three pillars of healthcare: prevention, diagnosis, and treatment. And specific 4 areas have been identified by Lisa Becker: assessment of disease onset and treatment success, management or alleviation of complications, patient care assistance during a treatment or procedure, and 4, research aimed at discovery or treatment of disease. So in talking of specific areas where AI is or can be used in the healthcare space, we are now going to look about 4 or 6 areas. The first one is precision medicine, which provides the possibility of tailoring healthcare interventions to individuals or groups of patients based on their disease profile, greatly amplifying diagnostic or based on their diagnostic or prognostic information and treatment response. It's a kind of tailor-made treatment opportunity which take into consideration various things. And then the next one is in the area of artificial intelligence and medical visualization, which is very good now, and I think a lot of applications are being developed in this area. And then next, in the area of intelligent personal health records, which will enable more responses for the treatment of patients. This may be achieved through health monitoring and wearables, and also through natural language processing, or NLP, which is being used to for many big data analysis within the healthcare, particularly for EMRs, that's electronic medical records, and translation of narratives provided by clinicians. And then next is in the area of robotics and artificial intelligence-powered devices. This area is also very, very important in surgical procedures, and also to assist physicians in other areas, and even patients, to also assist patients. And then next is what is termed ambient assisted living. With the aging society, more and more people live through old age with chronic disorders. Ambient assisted living has multiple objectives, including promoting a healthy lifestyle for individuals at risk, increasing the autonomy and mobility of elderly individuals, and enhancing security, support, and productivity, so people can live in their preferred environment and ultimately improve their quality of life. This can be achieved through what is referred to as the smart homes, a smart home where we have AI-enabled devices in the home of a patient, to monitor the patient and to also assist the patient to live a good life. And then we also have assistive robots. Then, of course, the area of healthcare insurances is also relevant. Now, of course, it's not that there are no limitations, there are limitations, basically based on the learning curve problem of AI-enabled devices. Now, I'll move on to the regulatory and policy concerns. There are 2 broad areas of concerns which I'm looking at, and these are what I refer to as process concerns and use concerns. For process concerns, there are issues in the area of data bias, that is the data that is used to train and validate the model, and then The next one is that of model reliability and the transparency problem, which Dr. Denelli talked about the other time. The use concerns are in the area of human rights, possible human rights infringement through the use of AI systems, and then, of course, data privacy or protection, informed consent, confidentiality, and liability. Now, process concerns first. I'll be looking at data. I'll be starting with data bias. Data bias in machine learning is a type of error in which certain elements of a data set are more heavily weighted or represented than others. A biased data set does not accurately represent a model's use case, resulting in skewed outcomes, low accuracy levels, and analytical errors. In general, training data for machine learning projects has to be representative of the real world. So where it is not representative enough, then of course there will be bias in the outputs of the AI system. Then I have a picture here which talks about this issue of data bias. Now then, okay, there are different types of data bias: sample bias, exclusion bias, measurement bias, recall bias, racial bias, observer bias, and then association bias. So please move on. I'll move on from that. To remedy the issue of data bias, we need to ensure the qualities of that we have high quality data, and the qualities are listed here. Accuracy, it must be accurate. Then it must be complete. No missing elements. Then consistency. There must be consistency in the labeling or measurement indices. Then uniqueness. If different tables refer to the same entity, then they should be consistent with each other. Then it should be timely. Timely. The ground truth may change with time. So the data should reflect the changing time. Result of data bias. It will have algorithms that can exhibit biases that can result in injustice with regard to ethnic origins, skin color, or gender. Then it can also lead to wrong or false diagnosis. Then the other process concern is that of the validity of the model. This is the function of the extent to which the data set is reliable. The slogan "garbage in, garbage out" applies to AI in this area. So the extent to which the model is reliable is very, very, very important. Research suggests that the degree of trust in AI varies with the kind of decisions it is used for. If it is mechanical, then there's high degree of trust. But if it is not, if it's subjective and it contains variables which can change human judgment, then it may not be quite, it may be lower in the degree of trust. Then the issue of transparency, well, that has been discussed earlier on. The AI systems tend to be opaque and not transparent, and which is referred to as the black box problem. And the problem is even more because when there is discrimination in the output and the system itself is not transparent, then redressing that problem may not be easy until the AI model itself is retrained and then redeployed for use. There's a US case of Loomis versus Wisconsin, although it's not in the X area, which is on the issue of the transparency the AI system was used to sentence Loomis, and it was believed that it was not, it has exposed him to unfair treatment. Okay, I will move on to use concerns now. Use concerns. These are in the areas of human rights, informed consent, confidentiality, cybersecurity, and liability of AI devices. I might not really be discussing cybersecurity here, but human rights first. The ongoing dialogue regarding the ethics of artificial intelligence should expand to consider the human rights implications of these technologies. International human rights law provides a universally accepted framework for considering, evaluating, and ultimately redressing the impact of artificial intelligence on individuals and societies. Since businesses are at the forefront of developing and implementing AI, the UN guiding principles on business and human rights are also very, very important in ensuring that AI is deployed in a rights-respecting manner. We also have bills of rights in national constitution, like that of the SA final constitution, which we also apply. As we also have regional or national legal instruments, specifically enacted to regulate AI, such as the EU General Data Protection Regulation 2016, then Council of Europe Guidelines on Artificial Intelligence and Data Protection 2019, and OECD recommendation on artificial intelligence. So the first issue in human rights is that of discrimination. A direct consequence of data bias is infringement of the right not to be discriminated against on the basis of sex, race, color, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, association with a national minority, property, birth, or other status. Use of AI, particularly within automated decision-making system, has a recognizable history of discrimination and bias, and those who are subjected to these automated decisions are at risk of falling victims to a largely unfair and inequitable process. These systems, often marketed as capable of making smarter, better, and more objective decisions, have been shown repeatedly to produce bias and erroneous outputs, from voice recognition that doesn't hear high-pitched, that is more feminine voices, to diagnostic systems that work purely for people with dark skin, to hiring algorithms that downgrade women's resumes. This is, like I said, that the issue of discrimination is an outflow, an outcome of data bias, because of the data that are being used to train the model. Of course, the output will also illustrate or show this kind of discriminatory outputs. Various proposals have been put forward, like conducting regular assessments, making technological or algorithm adjustments, then of course involving women in the decision-making process, not leaving it alone to the AI, and the issue of transparent algorithms. Then the issue of data protection is another human rights issue. Every person has a right to privacy. This is widely recognized and protected. AI, with its big data phenomenon in the digital space, obviously has serious implications on this right. It is customarily also acknowledged that protection of personal data is a fundamental right, and as such must be upheld. In fact, that's the position of the GDPR 2016 in Article 1. However, few jurisdictions have passed specific legislation on data protection, and recourse may only be had to extant human rights instruments. Well, there are many things I've put here on data protection, but I will move on to fair hearing. Fair hearing is another human rights issue in the use concern. This arises where decisions are made concerning someone through AI-enabled system. For example, qualifications for health insurance without affording one opportunity to be heard, particularly where the decision negatively impacts justice. This right is certainly not displaced by means of automated decision-making processes. Individuals should thus be able to challenge and requestly affect their rights for legitimate interests. So those who are also using AI systems must take that into consideration. By Article 22, Paragraph 3 of GDPR, data control act implements subject rights, freedoms, and legitimate interests, at least the right to obtain human intervention points of view and to contest the decision. Then another issue, human rights issue, is that of right to work. Although it has been said that AI is not meant to take over the job of health professionals, but to complement them, the truth remains that new technology has an uncanny way of displacing workers and even making previously skilled workers to suddenly become unskilled. Where this occurs, the human rights to work will be seriously compromised. Right to work, for example, is in Article 15 of the African Charter on Women and People's Rights. There are many issues that come with the use of AI and robotics in the workplace, changes in the requirements for future employees, reduction in the number of workers, creation of new job structures and new types of jobs, and so on. Other issues which policy issues must take into consideration when implementing AI-enabled systems. Right to work some solutions have been proposed. They include appropriate reforms in the education sector and retraining of workers. The 2018 communication from the European Commission on Artificial Intelligence, for example, suggests modernization of education at all levels to afford citizens needed skills, and 2, support workers whose jobs change or disappear through national schemes which would provide upskilling and retraining programs. And then social security systems also need to be reviewed to address these rights that may be infringed. Then the issue of intellectual property is also a human rights issue. Intellectual property rights are part of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenants on Economic and Sociocultural Rights, and the ICCPR. All AI raises various intellectual property issues, such as who owns AI-generated or produced works or inventions? Should AI's inventions be considered prior acts? Who owns the data set from which an artificial intelligence must learn? Who should be liable for creativity and innovation generated by AI if they impinge upon others' rights or other legal provisions? Let me just go to the issue of informed consent. This is a very important issue in the healthcare sector, that the patients must be informed and must give consent based on adequate or sufficient information. That has been discussed earlier on also. And the problem in AI, in the use of AI in the healthcare, was also highlighted the other time. If the AI is not explainable, if it is not transparent, then how will the medical personnel also be able to explain to a patient? That will be a problem. Then the issue of confidentiality. In Z versus Finland, the protection of personal data, it was said by the European Court of Human Rights that the protection of personal data, not least medical data, is of fundamental importance to a person's enjoyment of his or her right to respect for private and family life as guaranteed by the Convention. Without such protection, those in need of medical assistance may be deterred from revealing such information, and this will eventually endanger the society if care is not taken. So confidentiality is a key and is an ethical obligation of those healthcare personnel. But the problem with AI now is that when AI is used to process patients' data and records, then can those data still be confidential? Can privacy rights still be respected? So that also must be looked into when employing AI-enabled systems. Then the issue of liability. The use of AI technologies can cause damage to persons and property. An example is where wrongful medical treatment diagnosis by an AI software program occasions harm. So liability, the issue here is who should be liable. Some people have said AI can be liable, that the AI entity or system itself may be liable, but some have said no, that should not be. So, but that's the issue of liability. Who will be liable? Is it the person that designed the AI? Is it the controller of the AI system, or the person who is using it? So, who exactly should be liable? So, AI has hardware and software that comes in different forms and shapes. Some are mere objects, but others have humanoid characteristics that may have different legal implications. It is unclear whether AI should have legal personality as a corporation or whether a new category should be created as implied by the EU Committee on Legal Affairs 2015. But that option, of course, has been heavily criticized by robotics experts. The majority seems to agree that AI should not be given moral agency, as it would be immoral to give personhood that will make machines to compete with humans. Other options are to view AI-enabled systems or devices as tools. AI is mainly perceived as property created to aid humanity, for which corporations or individuals are responsible, and for which they have domination and control. Experts in robotics have determined that it becomes obvious that robots themselves are not where responsibility lies. Robots are simply tools of various kinds, although very special tools, and the responsibility of making sure they behave well must always lie with human beings. The other option is to regard AI systems. Some argue that AI should be decision-making to an extent, and are both considered as property in some sense. But most importantly, they are their owner's responsibility. This analogy comparing AI to animals has been considered misleading, mainly due to the fact that the former is inanimate and the latter is animate. There, however, seems to be agreement that all animals and AI, regardless of their level of autonomy, intelligence, or consciousness, are property. So, in concluding, I then said, towards balanced regulatory policy, we should note the following: that AI in healthcare is still an emerging, though fast developing field. AI is no doubt of great benefit to the health sector. Regulatory and policy efforts should therefore gear towards a robust regime to promote further innovation in the field in a responsible and responsive way. And I've included here the OECD 5 complementary value-based principles in the development of and deployment of AI systems: inclusive growth, sustainable development, and well-being, woman-centered values and fairness, then the issue of transparency and explainability, then robustness, security, and safety, and finally, the issue of accountability. Thank you very much for the time given for me to make my presentation.